The Long Road to Mandalore =RK equals Part 8 =RK equals Detention Center GAR HQ Coruscant. Obi-Wan, what happened to you? Ayla managed to interject when Kenobi paused his rant. Briefly, he looked at her as if he was unable to comprehend the question, then realization dawned in his eyes. Obi-Wan's shoulders slumped and he leaned on the wall next to the door. This war happened. Do you know how many people are under my command right now? My responsibility? Just the combat troops are in the billions with multiple times their number in support personnel. The confirmed military casualties so far are in the hundreds of millions, and with a significant number of our ground forces cut off, I know for sure we've lost many more. The casualties suffered by the various local forces across the outer and mid-rim before the separatists cut us off from them? We never got anything but an rough guess. Billions for sure. The civilians caught in the middle of it all? It doesn't bear thinking about. That's my life now, Ayla. I have to send people to die in numbers the human mind couldn't really comprehend, and it's going to get worse. As the Supreme Commander, I have to be thankful that the bulk of the Army and Navy so far has been clones. Now that multiple Army groups are being raised all across the core and the still loyal parts of the mid-rim, when the casualties begin coming home by the freighter load, a great deal of people would begin to wonder why should they send their loved ones to fight at places they had hardly heard of. Most of them had never been to, nor could they particularly care. Unless everyone's guess is very, very wrong, we'll need people like the Mandalorians, from warrior cultures and with military traditions. We'll need people like Vale to rally and lead them, to serve as an example. And our pet monster to keep the enemy honest, or else. Kenobi whispered the last sentence barely loud enough for Sakura to hear. You don't want to know the contingencies we need to consider in case the war escalates even further. Now he appeared haunted. It's the stuff of nightmares. I don't know what to say, Obi-Wan. It puts things into perspective, doesn't it? At its height, our order had 10,000 active knights. Even with the coup and everything else that happened, a lot of them are still alive. The same can't be said for all too many soldiers and civilians alike who suffered because the Council decided they knew what was best for the galaxy. Frankly, Ayla, there have been days lately I don't care if our esteemed friends had good reasons for the treason they committed, though I would admit that a part of me still hopes they really did. For what little it's worth, I'm sorry, Ayla said in a comforting tone. For what? You didn't do anything wrong. I'll leave you for now. Before one of us says something we'll regret. Take care and do cooperate, please. With those parting words, Obi-Wan left. Ayla sat on her bunk and thought about everything Kenobi told her. =RK equals Operations Room, GAR HQ, Coruscant. Obi-Wan was still trying to gather his thoughts and center himself after his conversation with Ayla. He couldn't believe how easily he lost his temper with her. Kenobi knew that the pressure of his post affected him, but until now he believed he had it more or less under control. He had to get a grip before he made an avoidable mistake that would get a lot of people killed. Obi-Wan called his chief aide and arranged to clear up the next few hours of his schedule. A bit of meditation and quiet would do him some good, he hoped. The former Jedi locked himself in his office with standing orders not to be disturbed unless it was something critical, and he fell into a meditative trance. He had barely begun to sort out his thoughts and emotions when his comm chimed. Kenobi shook himself back to the present, and with an exasperated sigh he switched out the comm. General Kenobi speaking. What is the issue? Sir, we just received a priority transmission from Tanab. Just a few minutes ago another fleet jumped to Jiza. The Separatists are making a concerned push for our naval station at Tanab then. That possibility got Obi-Wan's undivided attention. Tanab couldn't be allowed to fall. Too many other systems relied to it for food and security now that it was the Regional Republic Naval HQ. That's just it, General. It wasn't the Separatist. We got preliminary reports of a number of Venottas, acclimators and one of our mobile docks along with a supply train. We're still waiting for confirmation, but it appears that General Vale finally got back. We got garbled report that the enemy forces at Lantilles had been eliminated and a comprehensive are about their actions will be forthcoming soon. Admiral Alona is investigating and will get back to us once he's confirmed this isn't a separatist trick. The Admiral is requesting instructions if it's really Vale. Well, not everything just got that much more complicated. Obi-Wan could already hear politicians howling for Vale's blood while others would be eager to shower him with praise and try their best to unleash him on the separatists, often for all the wrong reasons. Obi-Wan? He was still conflicted. One thing he knew though, Vale needed to explain himself and that explanation better be damn good. I'll be in the operations room shortly. Call me if we get confirmation before I arrive. If it's indeed Vale, I want a secure channel with him ASAP. Kenobi dismissed his aide and went behind his desk from where he accessed the secured line with the Chancellor's office. Less than a minute later, Satine's holoimage materialized in front of him. Obi-Wan. You aren't calling with bad news this early in the morning, are you? His wife smiled at him and judging by her words and light tone she was currently alone in the office. Her smile made him feel warm and fuzzy inside, something that as a Jedi he should have found very dangerous and concerning. Nowadays? Satine was one of the few things he had left to keep him sane in this mad galaxy. That's entirely a matter of perspective. I just got a preliminary report indicating that Vale's fleet arrived at Jaiza. Our forces there and at Tanab are currently investigating and will get back to us shortly. Satine's eyes widened in shock. She took a moment to gather back her composure and when she addressed him again, she was in her full Chancellor mode, all efficiently professional. If true, this certainly complicates things. We've had to make certain promises that we can hold him to account and keep him from pulling another Bothoi or Sullust for that matter without authorization. If push comes to shove, can we contain him? Satine asked bluntly. Technically, Obi-Wan admitted. That's the best and worst kind of answer, you know. So you tell me. In truth, the questions we should be asking is can we afford to antagonize and deal with him if it comes for that? And can we afford not to? As the Supreme Commander of your military, Madam Chancellor, this is a question I need to raise. He could play dutiful soldier to the hilt when he had to, though it took a lot of trial and error to pull it off properly. General Kenobi, get me answers about Kamino, Sullust, and Bothoi. Find out his intentions too. I'll have a political firestorm to deal with. RK equals Part 9 RK equals Operations Room GAR HQ Coruscant Comlinks established. Encryption checks. We're secure, sir. The main holotank lit up and shimmering strands of light formed up into the ethereal forms of multiple people. Well done. Now, everyone except General Valentra and Admiral Gergerid, clear the room. Soon only 3 living people were present, joined by the hollow images of Admirals Coburn and Yularen. Well, isn't this ominous? The oldest officer looked in turn at everyone linked up by the conference call. Vale's back. He arrived a few hours ago at Jaiza and is currently on his way to Tanab. We've got his and his surviving officers' Rs for every battle they fought since leaving for the unknown regions to deal with Crimson. Complete with attached sensor logs from the ships that made it back. Obi-Wan cut to the chase. That's a good news, isn't it? Jaiza. Wasn't Lantilles in enemy hands? Not anymore unless the separatists reinforced the system since he left. After leaving Hutt space he hit Rondon, where only the separatist fleet in the system engaged him. The local SDF declined to fight Vale unless he approached their world, which he didn't. He mauled the CIS forces there, passed through Kashyyyk without accident and on arrival at Lantilles engaged and destroyed the enemy naval elements holding the system. That's on top of the reports of what happened in the Mid-Rim. Obi-Wan sent the preliminary reports of the engagements Vale fought from Kamino onwards, summaries really, because there hadn't been enough time for anyone go get through them properly, much less analyze the contents. A few minutes of silence followed while everyone digested the new information. It seems that the plan worked better than we expected. Yularen was the first to speak. If that mid-rim alliance Vale clobbered together still holds anyway, and even if the separatists took them out, they would have suffered casualties doing it. They couldn't have many reserves left after Vale was done with them. That's multiple sector fleets he annihilated in the past months. We'll have an opportunity once the core is secure, Coburn noted. That's well and good, though I don't believe General Kenobi gathered us just to break the good news. Jared pointed out the obvious. There wouldn't be a point of keeping this under the lid. The separatists must know Vale got back safely, Valentra agreed. What aren't you telling us, General Kenobi? While the news of Vale's return and successes in the Rim will certainly boost morale, it also puts us all in a delicate position. Politics at their finest. Coburn scoffed. What do our civilian lords and masters want this time? Didn't they cause enough damage already? Obi-Wan winced inside at the acidic tone of his colleague. Coburn was one of the old hands in the GAR, a career military who had served both in his home system's Navy and the Republic Judicial Forces before the GAR was established, and he volunteered to serve. Until recently, he had been a firm believer in civilian control over the military. However, the way the Senate and certain local government handled the war so far changed his tune. From what Kenobi knew of the man, that had been a tremendous achievement. Which explained why he was on board with the scheme that ended up with Satine as a chancellor. As you all know, certain deals needed to be made in order to secure the political support we needed to get a new chancellor elected. Now it's time to pay for some of them. One of the main promises we gave was that we will investigate Vale's actions, keep him from going too far, and if found guilty. Now Kenobi didn't bother trying to hide his wince. Why do I have the feeling that none of our friends in the Senate want Vale anywhere near the core when he's about to be judged? Jared's sarcasm was as dry as Tatooine's deserts. Well, some do want him to parade him around and shower him with medals and accolades, Obi-Wan admitted. He still found it hard to wrap his head around the idea of some people being gleeful about what happened at Sullust and Bothawui. This war. It tore the Republic apart on a fundamental level, and the former Jedi was becoming afraid that this time, there might not be a way to put it back together. Others scream for his head on the news. Jared added. It's most entertaining. His tone became somber. Like it or not, Vale is one of us now. Do you really expect us to throw him to the Krat hounds? There was a moment of uneasy silence. That was one can of worms no one wanted to touch. What we need to do is investigate what happened at Camino, Sullust, and Bothawui. At least one other flag officer, Admiral Joanna Holt, has been with him all the way. We have her reports too. We will be questioning them both, over the holonet, along with any of the senior officers in the fleet who survived to come back home. Obi-Wan explained. You know, under other circumstances, someone in Vale's position might be expected to fall upon his sword for the good of the Republic, Coburn said. I don't see a foreign head of state doing so. Let's not forget that despite his short but distinguished service with the GAR and the current rank he holds, he is Mandalore. Jared reminded them. Of course, there's the little fact that he's a Sith, though what that really means nowadays is apparently anyone's guess. Well, lately he did more for the Republic than the Jedi, that's for sure, Coburn concluded. Still, I would like to know the criff happened at Camino. Sullust is clear and cut case in my mind. He did go after legitimate military targets. While it might have been nice if possible to minimize civilian casualties, are you telling me that we're going to go after Vale for simply doing his job? The other officers made sounds of agreement. About Sullust? Not really, though we might have to put up a show for the Senate and the civilian population. Camino is iffy at best, and Bothawui. Obi-Wan trailed off. They had discussed Vale's actions there multiple times and never agreed. We know your thoughts about that, General Kenobi. However, the primary issue most of us have with his actions there was the level of escalation it represents. We are all eager to hear more details. Jared began, earning himself a scowl from both Yularen and Kenobi. He was known as one of those who approved and wanted the capability to repeat the feat on demand as a deterrent against the Sith continuing with their usual atrocities now that they were no longer controlled by the Sith and their mad dog, Grievous, was dead. That's why we're here. We'll be speaking with Vale and Admiral Holt shortly. Ideally we would have more time, however the Senate would get a whiff of his return sooner rather than later. The Chancellor wouldn't be able to keep them at bay for long after that. At least not now when a number of the senators got replaced or their seats became permanently or temporarily vacant until the war was over and the Republic fully restored. Too many senators now took their marching orders from governments that for one reason or another supported the new regime. Their concerns couldn't be dismissed without shattering the delicate balance that made most people believe that despite everything that happened it was still business as usual on Coruscant. Then by all means, get them on the line. Coburn sounded rather impatient. The long road to Mandalore =RK Part 10 =RK Observation Lounge, Republic Cruiser Solace, Tanab. We hung at a geosynchronous orbit above Tanab's North Pole, just one of scores of ships awaiting repair and resupply at a hastily constructed naval facility. Orbital storage depots, thin skeletal arms of makeshift construction cradles, multiple prefabricated civilian and military space stations, they all floated like a loose halo above the agri-world below us. All around us sparkled constellations of weapons, satellites and platforms enhancing the perimeter defenses. It was an impressive concentration of hardware, and for the first time since leaving Naboo I should have been able to relax. Instead, now that we were back in the fold so to speak, one kind of danger was simply exchanged for another, very different yet no less deadly one. "Are you ready for the Inquisition, Joanna?" I asked. My good Admiral walked past the otherwise empty lounge to stand beside me. She wore her parade uniform, complete with all the belts and whistles. "As ready as I'm going to get. Why do you like this place so much? More often than not I can find you here. It's peaceful. Quiet. And wasn't that such a Jedi-like response? Besides, the place had much more space than our cramped quarters. There's that. Those Venatas can't hold a candle to my freedom in any respect." There was a longing and a hint of anger when she said the name of her ship. I reminded myself again to pull all available strings and get her another Star Dreadnought or at least a battle cruiser once one became available. One should reward good work every time, loyalty too, even if the person he's dealing with doesn't really get a choice. That was something that served me very well in the past, even if I ended up betraying some of those people in the end. I must say I'm surprised. I expected that we would prepare more extensively for this meeting and everything that will follow, Joanna stated. To do anything but make sure we have all our facts straight would have been largely a waste of time and effort. There is too much we don't know about the situation in the Republic after the Jedi attempted their coup. Can't do much about it without going to Coruscant in person, and doing so would make a great deal of people very nervous, something we don't necessarily need right now. I see. We do have our facts straight, don't we? There was the tiniest hint of bite in Holt's tone. That we do, Joanna. That we do. I answered calmly. I had the Force woven around me like a second skin, a mask in place, along with every little trick I knew that would help me appear truthful when I needed and my temper in check. My comm pinged, just in time. I activated it and linked the incoming transmission to the main holo projector in this part of the lounge. Bright blue light flowed like water and Obi-Wan's image took shape, flanked by Talar and a man I was vaguely familiar with, Admiral Jerjerrod. A few moments later, two more projection joined us, bringing in Yularen and another man I was barely acquainted with, Admiral Coburn. "General Kenobi, it's good to see you again. General Valentra." The expected round of greetings was over quickly and we were ready to get to business. "General Vale, let me first congratulate you for successfully fighting your way back home. The Rs and sensor logs your fleet transmitted were invaluable for various reasons." Obi-Wan sounded stiffly professional, uncomfortable even. Sensing that, Talar took up the torch. There's no doubt that the campaigns you fought in the Mid-Rim and the one the way to Tanab will be studied in military academies over the galaxy for years to come. You did the impossible once again, my friend. However, we do need a clarification on certain issues. Camino and Bothoi, I presume, General Valentra? I answered in politely formal tone. Exactly. Gergerod eagerly exclaimed, and that earned him sidelong glances from both Obi-Wan and Yularen. Wasn't that interesting? What had been happening at the top ranks of the GAR while we were away? The only information we have about Camino came from separatist sources, and thus it is to be suspect. The same goes for the events of Sullust and Bothoi, though that didn't stop many people from making their own conclusions based solely upon that flawed data. Coburn sounded affronted by the very idea. We need the facts from the source. Facts that were in the R we already sent, and there had been more than enough time for those people and their aides to go over the most relevant data before Kenobi called this meeting, if barely. Ask away. Just to clarify, you believe the Separatists deployed a weapon meant to counter your battle mediation at Camino, and that is the reason for what happened? Obi-Wan asked. As he did so, Kenobi's eyes bore into mine, trying to divine the truth. That is correct, Obi-Wan. The orders I gave are a matter of record. The data logs of the surviving ships are available for examination if anyone fears tampering. With the situation at Tipoca City untenable and the Republic fleet in orbit damaged and exhausted, I gave the order to recover as much vital material and GAR personnel as possible while we still held the orbitals. After that, before we made our breakthrough, I ordered the fleet to target critical infrastructure on Camino related with the cloning of the army and all no sites containing sensitive information that couldn't be allowed to fall into enemy hands. At the same time, I held the fleet together with battle meditation to give us an edge against the ceaseless enemy assaults and better odds of getting away after the bombardment. It was then when everything went terribly wrong. I cast my eyes down, put my best remorseful expression on, and ensured that if Kenobi was able to examine me with his force senses using the transmission as a vector, he could sense I was really feeling remorseful. While true that I was indeed sorry about betraying the clones by raising Camino and the necessity of said act, real remorse was a stretch. I would do it again in the same circumstances. Satine becoming a chancellor was a great stroke of fortune, and under the wrong circumstances I believed her capable of sicking the GAR on me. The main source of indoctrinated clones for the Republic had to do, and that was the primary reason I went to Camino in the first place. The clone portion of the army was a double-edged sword that could be turned against me too easily not to do something about it at the first opportunity that presented itself. Wrong in what way? Can it be duplicated? Can you prevent it from happening again? Gergerod asked before I could extrapolate. Coburn looked like he was very interested in those answers as well, and while Talar seemed mostly neutral on the topic, Obi-Wan and Yularen felt like they were almost afraid from what I could tell them. My battle meditation was disrupted. The effect was tremendous and hit the whole fleet at exactly the wrong moment too. Everyone connected to me through my technique was able to follow the last orders they got, literally, and they kept doing it until I was able to wrest control. By the time that happened, Camino had been subjected to bombardment from the whole fleet. Whatever it was used, and I do have a suspicion, it tore a tier, a conduit to the dark side itself. That caused as much damage to Camino as the bombardment, if not more. It nearly destroyed us all, and that is something every survivor from that battle can confirm. As far as preventing the same thing affecting me and anyone under the influence of my battle meditation, while I believe it is possible, I won't be using that technique at any time when ships under my command might need to strike targets on the surface of a friendly planet. I earnestly explained and put a solid amount of anger and frustration in my voice as I spoke about what happened. Admiral Holt, do you concur? Kenobi asked. I do, General. What happened at Camino? She shuddered, and it wasn't faked at all. While I am not force sensitive, at Camino I felt the dark side. It was hungry, ravenous. Insanity incarnate. It almost consumed us all, General. Joanna's voice became a hollow whisper as she remembered exactly what happened and how I broke her along with everyone in the fleet. Yet, moments later she looked up at me and came back to life. If it wasn't for General Vale, we would have been all damned at Camino. Profound gratitude radiated from her as she recalled the relief and joy she felt when I brought her back from beyond the edge of madness, put her back together and thus bind her to me until her dying breath. Admiral Holt, General Vale, I'm sorry about what you had to endure. The same is true for the people under your command. If they need anything to recover. Obi-Wan trailed off. We'll get back to you on that one, General Kenobi. I answered for us both. You mentioned you had a suspicion of what happened at Camino, General Vale? Jar Jared prodded. Indeed. When I served the Sith Empire, our Sith sorcerers and alchemists worked on countermeasures against battle meditation. The most talented and powerful users of that techniques were Jedi, with the one believed to be the most dangerous being my first wife, Ashara. It is my belief that the Separatists got their hands on one of the prototypes or something in that vein created over the past 4,000 years. On how they were able to use such an artifact, their ground forces at Camino were led by Old Republic Jedi, which explains how our soldiers were barely able to slow them down despite extensive preparations. I explained. Can they create more of those devices and can they be reused? Jared asked again before anyone else could open their mouths. The prototypes I was familiar with were one use only. I don't know how many the enemy has or if the Jedi working with them can recreate them. Master Perion wasn't known for his skills in alchemy, however I don't know the identity of everyone who made it to this era along with him and his band of insane zealots. Deceiving and misleading with creative use of the truth mixed with a lie or two. Can you protect yourself if another one is used? What about the soldiers you're enhancing? Coburn asked. I believe so, now that I know what to watch for. However, it would depend on the tactical situation. I can make no guarantees. Any fleet I'm using battle meditation upon should avoid providing orbital support. Ideally, if it happens in the vicinity of a friendly planet, said world will have its planetary and theater shields on and at full power. 4 admirals and 2 generals, one of them me, looked at Kenobi to see if he believed my words. A great deal hung on that. RK equals, Part 11, RK equals, Operations Room, GAR HQ, Coruscant. Obi-Wan felt torn. He couldn't sense any deception from Vale. Even his remorse about Camino felt genuine, yet that in itself ran alarm bells in his head. What Vale said about the events at Camino, it sounded somewhat plausible. There were records, stories, of the Sith crafting and deploying terrible weapons using their sorcery and alchemy. Kenobi had seen the effects of Vale's battle meditation and believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Sith Empire would have created countermeasures for such a technique. The Jedi of the Old Republic might have tried to do the same, though Obi-Wan hoped it wouldn't have used the dark side. He had seen the files Vale recovered from the ancient Jedi stronghold. He knew about the Old Republic remnant and their collusion with the Separatists. It was plausible that they had offered more help at Camino than the Jedi they sent to lead the Sith ground forces. The destruction of Camino was a great victory for the Separatists, both military, political and propaganda one. It would be logical, easy even, to blame the Confederacy and their allies about everything that happened there. Why then did Obi-Wan have doubts? Was this how the Council felt before they decided to betray the Republic and launch the coup? Were they too afraid from Vale, his influence and what he might be doing no matter what justifications he could give? It would be so easy to act upon his fears, to order Vale arrested. And doing so might very well see Tanab suffer the same fate as Bothoy. One thing Kenobi knew for certain, it was unlikely that Vale would go along quietly. After all, everyone had a painful reminder what happens when someone betrays him and corners him. Worlds tended to die then, in a most horrifying fashion too. Your account about Camino sounds plausible, General Vale. Obi-Wan eventually allowed. Voicing it, accepting it, even if it was for the time being, until he could further investigate what in the name of the Force happened there, it made him feel sick in the pit of his stomach. He resented Vale for putting him in this position, for the atrocities he committed, even if he could apparently justify every single one of them. In doing so, Obi-Wan could feel the dark side growing within him, feeding of his negative emotions, and he felt dirty. It was going to get worse too, he just knew it. Well, you're the expert. Valentra let out a sigh of relief. That's good enough for me. Now that we've covered Camino, let's get to the thorny issue, Bothoi. What you did there, Delcatar, it was extreme. Please, explain yourself. Obi-Wan was almost afraid to hear how Vale would justify his actions, even more so that he might actually agree with them, as the supreme commander of the Republic military, if certainly not as a decent human being. I foresaw the possibility of betrayal shortly before we left for Bothoi. I believe that at the time the Bothan Council hadn't made up their minds to switch sides. Still, expected treason or not, it wasn't like our fleet had better alternatives. We believed that it was just a matter of time before the Separatists would be able to bring overwhelming forces to bear against us, and every battle we fought and won caused more losses, damage and expenditure of supplies we simply couldn't replenish. We had to reach Bothoi, and if it was a friendly port, it would have greatly enhanced our situation. If it was hostile, Vale grimaced. Then our options were very few and none of them good. First, we could have jumped in the outer system, evaluated the situation, and in a case of betrayal, backtracked. In doing so, the best we could have hoped for was to try and reach the territory of the Mid-Rim Alliance, or attempted to go to ground in the nearby sectors, hoping for Republic relief before we were tracked down or ran out of supplies. That would have been a waste of a perfectly fine fleet and would have likely doomed my command for no gain. You would have lived to fight another day, Coburn pointed out. I'm Mandalore. I couldn't hide or run for my own safety when my people are fighting for their lives. Further, I'm likely public enemy number one as far as the Separatists are concerned. They want my head and won't stop chasing me if they win the war. He gave them all challenging looks. You have your doubts that we can successfully win without you holding our hands? Yularen sounded equally amused and affronted. You've proven yourselves competent enough. Many of our other officers? Not so much. I know as well as you do that too many of them are green, undertrained, and often promoted far beyond their capabilities because there simply isn't anyone more qualified for the job. This war hangs in the balance, and my abilities, if used at the right time and place, can tip it in our favor. I have to reluctantly agree after skimming some of the hours of your battles in the Mid-Rim. There was grudging respect in Coburn's voice. What other alternatives did you believe you had at Bothoi? We could have attempted to fight our way out conventionally. And win or lose that battle, it wouldn't have mattered in the end. We would have suffered too many casualties, too much damage to be able to fight our way back to Republic space. That option I disregarded immediately. It would have meant throwing the lives of my subordinates away in a futile battle, and I refused to do that when I had another option. That much I can respect. Coburn nodded. What exactly did you do at Bothoi, General Vale? Jared simply couldn't keep the excitement out of his voice. He didn't even try. There is a ritual that, when used with the right preparation, artifacts, and by someone who had enhanced themselves through Sith sorcery and alchemy the correct way, has the potential to give them immortality. Obi-Wan blanched at the very idea. He could feel the sheer shock and disbelief radiating from Valentra and Jared. Yularen and Coburn looked little better. The last thing this galaxy needed was an immortal Vale, especially if the process required the death of whole worlds. Right then and there, Kenobi was ready to order the man's arrest or even death and damn the consequences. Without those, the ritual could still be used. It's going to kill the user, however, if they're powerful and skilled enough, they can take their enemies with them. In a nutshell, it is a suicide technique at the best of times. What I did was deceptively simple. I used the Force to consume the life force of everyone and everything on Bothoi, and then, while I was dying, I focused that energy and used it to wipe out the crews of the Bothan fleet blocking our way, which allowed us to escape the trap. Yet you're still here. You didn't die. Jared's eyes practically shone with the possibilities. Oh, I did die. I just got better. That's not something that I'm likely to pull off again anytime soon, if ever, so I would much appreciate if I don't find myself in similar situation again. Now, that little revelation and the truth with which rang, shocked Kenobi to the core. He knew the Sith of old were powerful. Vale being able to do what he did to Bothoi was all the proof anyone would ever need. But this? Dying and somehow coming back. Was Vale lying? There was no deception Obi-Wan could detect. What he said about Bothoi rang as true to all his senses. That is your justification for Bothoi, then? Kenobi ground out. I am not done, General Kenobi. I didn't do it for military reasons alone, though they were to the forefront of my mind. There was the political aspect as well. I destroyed Bothoi to make a point, to show what could happen if someone else betrays us and turns their ships and armies against us, to make every separatist ship captain who isn't a droid think twice about engaging a fleet led by me, to make their leadership and those of any wavering Republic world see the potential price of treason. Vale smiled coldly. A reputation for being monster has served me well in the past. What do you think will happen once we go on the offensive and I bring a fleet in orbit of a separatist world? Would we need a costly ground invasion, one which we could ill afford, a prolonged siege that would bind portion of our fleet there, or? The smile turned deadly. Would they fall all over themselves to surrender if I am in command of that fleet? What about the next one, once they saw I am perfectly willing to let them live if they are being reasonable? And if they decide to fight it out? Jared asked. I'll have to make an example then. Jared's own shark's smile matched Vale's. Obi-Wan looked around, seeking allies among the highest-ranked and most trusted officers in the GAR. The only one who looked disturbed by Vale's suggestion was Yularen. Jared was all for it, that was obvious for all to see. While Coburn wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea, he seemed oddly fine with it, and Valentra. He was simply grim, yet accepting. So this is it? You expect us to burn as many Confederate worlds as it would take to end this war? Obi-Wan asked. He should have been incredulous. Appalled. Instead, he had expected something like that. Too many contingencies, too many of the more realistic plans to bring an end to the war weren't for the faint of heart or those who valued their morals. Obi-Wan, how exactly do you expect us to win? We will need to destroy the Confederacy's ability to wage war. Anything else would mean merely a ceasefire while we all prepare for the next war. Then if 5, then perhaps 20 or even 60 years, we will have to fight the separatists, and from what little I've heard about the political situation, then our position would likely be weaker.